fun to find a solution and build something that provides a solution. If you are driven by the capital gain, then you will 9 out of 10 constantly fail.
And I think founders are mostly delusional. They think money will solve everything. Hey everyone, welcome to the Nalikes Podcast. I'm Talha Asif, and in each episode, we bring you insightful conversation with the founders and builders who are shaping the future of Web3. Our goal here is to educate and inspire Web3 founders while showcasing what other successful founders are doing for their projects and startups. Make sure you watch till the end as you'll learn practical and actionable steps that you can apply to your own startups today. Today's guest is Kamran, who is the co-founder of MH Ventures and BSC News. Kamran has been a founder himself and now he's an investor. So we'll be talking to him about his personal journey of what it is to be a founder and how to be successful at it. And we'll talk more about the investing side. Thank you so much, Kamran, for coming on. How are you?
I'm very good, man. I appreciate you having me on. I have my own podcast, but when I'm sat in the seat of being interviewed, it's always a bit nerve-wracking, but yeah, ready to go.
Amazing, Kamran. So Kamran, in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I want to learn as much as from you and get valuable knowledge for other founders so they can, apply them to your startups. But before we get into that, can you quickly tell us who is Kamran, what have you done, and what led you to Web3?
Yeah, cool, man. So I'll do a quick intro. So from a young age, I've been exposed to business just because of my grandparents running. I'm Asian, so my grandparents running like stores. So they had furniture shops and household shops. So I worked there from the age of running tills. It's from the age of 8 or 9. Building furniture at age of 10 at flat pack furniture, talking wardrobes, beds, all stuff that's flat pack. So I've exposed to that from a really, really young age. And then moved into a lot of small businesses that I ran from the age of 13 and upwards, that were never really going to have a long lifespan, but just something that I was intrigued on doing. So that was the really young age of me doing stuff, worked various places for different companies. Nothing, with big names or anything, but always knew I needed to do something for myself. I just never knew what that would be. I never did, and never, even till today, didn't know, I still want to do this. It's always I want to do something, but what the hell would that be? And I just found my feet. I got into Web3 because mainly because of my older brother was mining Bitcoin back in 2014 or so. I entered the space running a OTC desk, so we were facilitating on-ramping and off-ramping of Bitcoin to fiat. That's how I got into crypto in 2015. And yeah, that's just my entry into crypto.
Amazing. When you first found about Web3, were you skeptical? And what was the thing that really made you think, okay, this is something I want to spend the next few years of my life? What was that reason? Was it decentralization? Was it the monetary side of it? What was that thing that really got you hooked to Web3?
So when I entered the space in 2015, I found a gap, which was the OTC market. And, that was super lucrative because no one was doing it due to licensing and banking and everything else. Hence why the exchanges like Binance and, as much as they have that ability to do it now, they didn't have that back then. So, it wasn't because I was oh my God, I understand Bitcoin, I understand this space, because it was so new at the time. I wasn't in the space for that. At the time, it was another business, was, successful, was making money. And that's why I did that all the way, up until, let's say, 2020. And I think that's when I really fell in love with the space. Don't get me wrong, 2017 is where I was super interested as well, just because of things were evolving. Again, didn't really understand it too much. But then during I think people are really are founded in Web3 during a bear market, and that's where the love really starts, because I was intrigued of finding out more. I think that's what really sold me on becoming someone on chain. But I think my real onboarding was 2020, even though I had been in the cycle for 5 years, is when I really became on chain and actually started to become an advocate for decentralization and everything else.
Got it.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I won't ask you why did you become a founder, because then you made it very clear that since you were a child, you were exposed to this. So it is natural that it came to you to do your own stuff in Web3. I want to touch on ideation and finding opportunities, because you mentioned that you found an opportunity for the ODC decks, and then later on, I think you did BSC News as well. We'll touch on that as well. What framework can founders use to identify opportunities or identify problems? And then how can they validate their idea? Because one of the reasons I'm doing all of this thing is that founders work on ideas and problems that no one really cares about. So in your experience, what have you personally done to figure out problems, opportunities, and ideas to work on, and how have you validated them?
So I think the best ideas and the most successful things, and this I can only speak from personal experience, right? Someone could have a total opposite opinion to me and be like, and they've been successful on that. So for me, it's more, and how I actually go ahead and try and do things, is that problems I would solve is because I've experienced myself. It would be stupid for me to go and be like, oh, this developer is facing this problem, let me go and solve it for him. I have no clue about devs and how to code and stuff like that. I have, very minimal, I should say, not none, because I do, but I just very minimal. So it's things that I've experienced myself, and that's how I would say, okay, how do I solve this? Because I've experienced myself, and because I have a passion for it, it makes it easier for me to take that on and actually want to solve it, because I'm not doing it for financial gains. I'm doing it because I'm problem solving because I find that fun, right? I find it fun to find a solution and build something that provides a solution. I think that's the best way in trying to find success in an idea. If you're like, I'm a big advocate of saying, if you are driven by the capital gain, then you will 9 out of 10 constantly fail. If you're not passionate about building something because you're solving or you're building something for what's that's in your heart that you want to do, and the only thing that's driving you is, this is, oh, I heard this has got so much money in this narrative, I should follow that. And that's the wrong thing to do. Yes, of course, different sectors, like, being e-commerce to crypto being more lucrative, but then do something you're passionate about in crypto, not just because, don't go and bring an e-commerce to crypto because you think that that's going to make you more money. Like, e-commerce really belongs in the e-commerce world, right? Does that make sense? And I hope I'm not confusing it, but
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So one thing that I try to get out of all the guests that I bring on, because I bring founders from all walks of life, people who have sold companies for millions of dollars, and people who have worked with some of the biggest companies. But the takeaway, and then that's very common theme, is that solve your own problem. Painkillers, work on painkiller ideas, and I think that is what you were trying to say, is that don't chase the shining object. Try to do something for yourself as well, because there's a term called product founder fit. So like, just like you have a product market fit, there's a product founder fit. Is that you will only, majority of the time, and like you said, this is from my experience, you'll only be successful if you personally have that problem, or if you personally care about the industry you're in. So I think that's a really good takeaway for other founders. Work on problems that you personally have, or you at least have some relation to that problem. All right.
Yes, I was just going to add to that. It's like, you have to have passion for it, because when the times get tough and it's not just, constant glory because you're a founder and everything's, oh yeah, look, everything's amazing here. Like, you have really, really bad times, tough times, and you have to have the passion to really, really push through. And that's why, if you're chasing money, you're going to give up straight away. Like, oh, fuck this. Oops, sorry, but oh, forget this. This isn't cutting it for me. I'm not making the $1 million a month, so I'm going to go and find something else. Whereas, I have passion for this. I need to keep going.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I completely agree with you. So the advice that I've gotten from all the previous episode is that when you come up with an idea, let it cook. Don't just rush into it. Solve your own problems, or at least have domain knowledge on that specific problem. Don't just go on to start a venture because you think that's lucrative. And I think that's the problem we see in Web3. People are choosing shining objects. People are saying, okay, this guy made X amount of money from this specific product, I want to do something different. But they don't realize that that specific guy has years invested and had domain specific knowledge, and he was willing to give everything for it. Amazing. The next thing that founders face is bootstrapping and fundraising, right? Not everyone is in position to keep bootstrapping. I mean, that's my personal, keep bootstrapping. Don't raise venture until you actually need it. But what has been your personal experience, and what's your advice for founders that should they bootstrap or should they fundraise? Till when should they keep bootstrapping, and when is fundraising important? And being an investor, you can give really good advice because you've been on the both side. You've been a founder, you've been an investor. So let's talk more about that, because let's be honest, without money you can't really do anything. I mean, you can do anything as long as you have the skills, but money is important, right? You can't really do anything without money. So what's your thought on that?
So when I founded BSCN or BSC News, back in end of 2020, if you know, for the listeners, that's a media company on Binance. Well, it was on Binance Smart Chain. It was founded on Binance Smart Chain. We're the biggest media company on that chain. You know, doing like 3 or 4 million monthly active users on the website, about 1 million plus on social media. But we've just gone like, you know, Web3 wide now. Did a huge rebranding. Anyway, at the peak, I like build a team, you know, to like 35 people, etc. Bad move, and stuff like that. But you know, we never raised any capital at all. Even today, like it's mainly been you know, bootstrapped by us. And we started when, you know, there was no one on Binance Smart Chain. But luckily for us, we were able to bring revenue in really quickly, maybe 3 and 4 months afterwards.
Was it intentional or unintentional, the revenue thing?
I would say a bit of like, I think it was intentional because we were seeking, but it was unintentional of the volume that followed afterwards, right? Because, you know, as a founder, like, you know, you fit into every position, and that's from marketing, you know, sales, managing teams, and all of the internal stuff and all of that, right? And everything else. So I went out there and tried to, as much as we were a media site, like how does a media site make money? And so I was just trying to innovate. I never thought this far, right? Like the passion was just build this site, you know, provide news, and everything else will just flow. So what we didn't do, and I think a lot of founders, what they do is they want to have this picture perfect scenario, right? Like, I want to build this big company, so I need, you know, it's going to make it easier if I have 5 people on the books. So I need 5 people to make this perfect. I need the best website. I need this, and then all of this collectively is just going to cost them way too much, when they really shouldn't go outside of their means, right? Build with what's within your means, and then afterwards, once that money's coming, revenue's coming, then start to build from that. People have this thing in their mind, like, you know, people just do it without, regardless of business, like, oh, I want to do this, but before I do this, I need this to do that. You know, like, oh, I know I'll be better at working if I go and get the latest Apple MacBook or whatever it is. When really, like, you just don't need that, right? When people, that's how people think. So we never raised capital. We were lucky enough to end up being revenue generating, you know, very soon afterwards. So we didn't have to do that. You know, there were difficult times. But back to your question of when do I think that people should, you know, when they should bootstrap, or if they should bootstrap, I think it's all down to what they want to do in terms of the company. Like, do they want to exit this company later on? And if so, like, taking in external capital means that they just going to be paying back the investors rather than, you know, what they've built. Can this survive on just, you know, them bringing in the revenue? And that's how you got to look at it. And I think different companies, for me personally, like on the media side, I don't need to bring in external capital. Hence why I've not done that. And if I ever exit, then I will be the one that, the hard work that I've put into it, I will gain from that later on. So yes, I don't need to do that. But then you look at all of the other investments in Web3, in crypto, 95% of products that have raised capital in crypto don't generate any revenue, or they're always at a loss. So yes, they will have to go out to build raise capital so they can actually build these products. I think another scenario if I go on to the next bit. But yeah, I think it's really hard to gauge like when people should raise capital and when shouldn't, because I've not myself gone out and raised capital. I've deployed capital as an investment, and I've made companies that have never raised capital. So it's hard for me to kind of say, you should do this. And then I don't really think there's a clear cut way of saying that. I think it's purely down to the position that they're in. And I think people rush too quickly to go and raise capital because they think it's a really cool idea to bring in external capital, when they don't realize sometimes it's actually really a negative and they don't need to do it.
And I think founders are mostly delusional. They think money will solve everything, but obviously money solves a lot of problems, but not every time. And then the thing is, you just have another boss that you have to satisfy, because instead of focusing on building the product, you have to meet the expectations of your founders. So the takeaway here is that, I mean, if you can bootstrap, keep bootstrapping. And again, it's more personal, right? Some people prefer the freedom lifestyle and some want to chase the unicorn. So it's very subjective, and I agree with you. But there are some cases where founders, capital needs it. Let's say if you're building infra, or you're just doing something, or if you already have traction, you just want to scale it, so you need a venture. So we'll get to that later when we get to that. But there's a very good point that you touched, is that you mentioned that you scaled to 35 and that was a bad decision. Let's talk more about hiring. When do you really need people, and how you should hire, and what are the mistakes that you have made? I'm pretty sure you have, with all your ventures, might have made some mistakes. So let's talk about what advice can you give founders in team building, how they should hire, when they should hire, and should they? And then one thing I have is hire slow, fire fast. And do you agree with that?
Okay, so I'll start from the bottom up. So building out this team was like probably building out a big team was the first time I've ever experienced doing that with BSEN, right? Every time I've done something, has always been on a smaller scale where I've had to have 2-3 people, and that was it at max. So, as I said, we were fortunate enough, we were bringing in a decent amount of revenue. And I was like, cool, the more stuff that we can produce in terms of news, the more people we have, the more we can produce, right? And we were trying to scale up the Twitter, we were trying to scale up the website in terms of traffic. And I'm a big believer of I need to do things first to then be able to pass it on. So I would, do things, learn how to do it, understand the functions of it, and then I'd try and pass it on to someone else. I think the biggest issue that I faced was I was building out, okay, we want to build this family tree of people in terms of the internal staffing. And so I ended up with okay, cool, we need 15 journalists and whatever so and so of this to manage everything. And it was a bad idea because no one can in Web3. There wasn't enough news to consume, so the quality would be died down because we were trying to just push out any sort of content. 2, the bigger the team gets, the harder it is to actually execute on those deals. And because we had so many people, we were always fighting, okay, instead of simplifying the revenue streams, we were complicating them because we needed to bring in the capital to pay the staff, right? So that's the reasons why it was we scaled too quick when we didn't really need to. Keep business simple, keep revenue simple, then actually just scale up. People say scale up quick, but actually scale up really slowly. That as demand gets too much, then bring an extra person in, not bring 5 extra people in because you think you expected this. And that's where I was at fault. So as time I realized that, I scaled down really quickly. Anyway, going back to when people should recruit and how it should be done. So one, I'm not really a person that looks at a resume And once I've looked at a resume, I'll go through 10 interviews to find the right talent. I can't do that. And I say that because from personal experience, if I'm going to go to an interview, I'm really shit, right? I'm really bad at speaking. And I'm not educated at all. I didn't go to university or anything like that, so I can't say I've got a degree or anything like that. So I kind of don't look at that stuff. I want to jump on a call, yes, look at their past experiences and actually get to know them. And then I'm like, quick, like I'm more of I'll hire quick, right? And if I realize quickly that they're not the fit, I'll fire quick as well. Because I think that's the way to go. Yes, I'm churning out so much, but I just can't recruit slow when I want to fill a position. I think it just takes too much time. I think, yeah, people will have more of a success rate, but I just hate going through that process. We didn't have the ability, we didn't have that capital, I should say, to be able to go and get really, really good talent. If you know what I mean. Like we didn't want to be paying the best for someone. Like, a dev in the US compared to a dev in India, the difference in pricing is going to be, huge. So we didn't have the capital to go and get that US dev. Not that I'm just saying in terms of like what we were recruiting for, but weren't recruiting for devs. So what I would say to how you recruit is try and keep it in terms of as minimal as possible. You should, as a founder, do everything yourself. And I mean near enough everything, right? You should understand everything, be able to do everything. And then as you say, okay, cool, I'm peaking out here because I need to now focus on step 2, then you should backfill the step 1. And that's how you should recruit.
Yeah, I agree with you. That part is that don't delegate something that you personally don't know. That is something I've made a mistake. In part, I've hired SDRs to do outreach on a specific platform until I personally don't know how to do it. So when I shifted that, is the first I'll figure it out, then I'll pass on to them. That has been very good. So the takeaway is that you said scale slow, don't really hire too fast. Let the demand come and then scale. And your suggestion and opinion is that hire fast and fire fast. Because in your specific situations, you need to fill the roles quickly. And then once you know that this is not the right fit, you let them go. For me personally, for me personally, and for a lot of founders, firing people is not an easy thing. I mean, if you fire people really quickly, you get really good at it, but that is something that's very subjective. Amazing. Before we move on to the investment thing, I just want to quickly touch on one thing: sales. Getting money in. Right? That's the most important thing that any company can do, right? No matter how good your product is, how good you are branding and all that, the only thing matters is, are you bringing in money or not? Are you profitable at the end of the day? So from what I've learned is from BSc News and the other stuff as well, let's talk more about sales. What's your opinion on founders focusing on sales? Because if a founder can't sell, or one of the founder can't sell, it's very difficult for them to succeed. So what has been your experience in selling? Because from what I know from BSc News, you might be getting inbound leads as well that people want to post on your platform. But in other ventures that you've done, how important is sale? What have you done to get sales? And then let's talk more about sales in Web3 as well, because I do sales as well for my company, and you might have done as well. But founders really struggle to do sales. They think that if they add this more feature, people will come in, but they at some point have to go and out there and sell. So can we let's talk about more on that?
Yeah. So what I would say is, yes, me personally, at the beginning, I was doing all of the outbound. But then we got to a point that as I passed that on to other people to do, we had a lot of inbound coming in, where 99% of our revenue was coming from inbound, and I stopped outbound. And I'll come on to the reasons why I stopped outbound. People and other people will say I'm an idiot, but I'll explain why. But not most, 99% of sales, even till today, is all inbound, incoming sales. But at the very beginning, I needed to do the outbound to just gauge that. And the reason why I wanted to, it was a good fit for me. I don't really have sales experience. I think I'm actually really bad at selling, if I'm going to be honest. And that's because I'm too honest. Okay. I don't want to rip people off. I want to actually give fair value, and I want and I want to actually show them that I'm giving you something that I can provide real value for, right? And I'm not going to start and charge you gringo rates, right? So as a founder, I think even if you don't have sales skills, it doesn't mean when I mean that, it doesn't mean you have to work somewhere in sales or anything like that. You just need to go out there, like, you're passionate about your product. Go and speak to people that you think are the right clients, right? And then just pitch them in a way of what you've built and why it's good for them, and just be truthful. And then that should turn out and potentially be a sale. And I think just reiterating that over and over is where the demand will come from. Having these skills of like being the salesperson and using different techniques, yes, it works. I think you've got to have the personality for it. But as a founder, if you don't, it's fine. You just go and find the clientele that are right. And if you've got the right product for them, they're going to buy it, right? So that I personally went out and did all of the sales. I did all of them for the first few months until like inbound just took over hugely, and that's when I started to bring in. And I actually didn't bring anyone in. I brought an admin in first to help me with the admin side of stuff. And when that was peaking out, I was like, cool, I need to now bring someone else in. So then I swapped it in terms of there's too much demand in the inbound, we're stopping outbound. And my thought process, even till today, has been, I don't want to do outbound. I think for the sort of business that we do, it debrands us in terms of quality of how we do things, because I don't know, I just have this perspective of like, if I'm, we're a media company, yes, we offer marketing material for people to do, like, Twitter stuff, podcasts, whatever it may be. If I'm reaching out to someone, I just don't think it gives that reflection of these guys are a high quality brand in comparison to you're reaching out to me. Cool, you want something, cool, you're gonna want to buy this, and you already are looking up to us as a brand because you feel like it's good for your product, right, or your business to be featured by us. Does that make sense? So that's the concept I took.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and that's what we personally have started doing as well. I think we connected a few months ago.
Yeah.
At that time, my strategy was different, and this time the strategy is different. I mean, we have also reduced our efforts in outbound because, yes, when you get to a stage, you really want people to come to you, because if you're just chasing people, then again, that's the concept, right? You don't want to be the chaser, you want to be the attractor. But initially, when you're starting out, you do have to reach out, because how else will people know, right, who you are? So I mean, there's a right balance. But I agree with you. Initially, like you said, right, you have to do outbound until you get to a stage where word of mouth or inbound. And one thing, the whole reason this podcast as well is show people who you are, right? Talk about what you do, talk about what results you do, and when they see you on video or through your written content, they get to know. And things are changing at these days. I have a good friend, Kai, who is into Web3 sales, and he talk about the only best thing you can do is start talking about what you do. Amazing. So we covered ideation, we covered bootstrapping, fundraising, we covered hiring, we covered sales as well. Let's wear the investor hat, from a founder to investor hat. How was that transition for you? I mean, and how and why did you do that? And let's talk about, what do you look for a founder to invest in? In the previous episode, I've had a founder that I think I introduced to you guys as well, Roy from Shadow War, who recently raised $5 million for his game. And he mentioned that fundraising is like dating. When a girl is looking for a boy, he's looking for check boxes, right? Similarly, investor is also looking for check boxes. Do they have this, that, and why? So talk more about from your perspective as an investors and the founders that are watching, so they can likely become more suitable to get funded, because for some kind of products we do need funding. So let's talk about that. How was your transition from a founder to an investor? And talk more about MH Ventures as well, please.
Yes. So I think one of the biggest things that as a founder that we fall into, and I'm very much is the right word, a victim of, is once we find a little bit of success, we like have this thing of, I'm superior. If I touch something, it turns to gold, So I had this thing of like, cool, as I was on a scale when I was building BSCN of like super busy and then delegated, cool, time would, I'd have a little bit more time. And if something else happened, I'd be super busy. And then it would come down and I had a lot more time. And in these moments of silence, which actually didn't last long, this up here, get bored. And yeah, cool, I've got capacity. Let's try and do something else on the side. And I know in my heart that was the wrong idea, was the wrong thing to do, because I needed to focus on one thing to give my full mind share to, so I can actually build great products and a great service. But I can say that I am guilty of doing things again also that fail. Like I have built stuff that was personal stuff that I would do, but I wanted to turn into something bigger. But for that time it has failed. And I'm guilty of that, and I shouldn't say I should never have done it. I just wanted, anyway, whatever. Different story. So how, me becoming an investor as well was totally what I'm just saying, is had some free time at BSM, was like, cool, let's try this. And one thing led to the other, and luckily enough, so, it turned into, being successful. And as I did get more free time, I have to say, look, BSCN is what, 4 years old? 2024, yeah. So, 3 years old. Yeah, 3 years old. It's still really young, right? Like super, super young as a company. But I'm lucky enough, I have a really good team. We've streamlined everything massively. So I ended up having more time. So now I would say I'm like, 70% in working on the venture side, investing, and then 30% on the media side.
Do you
Go on,
think is it because you have had success with BSC News that you were confident to go and start an investment company? Again, God forbid if the opposite would have happened, but you would have to try it again to do another startup. I mean, again, I definitely think that gave you the confidence, right? That success with BSC News, with that. So, do you think other founders, should they have success with their startup first and then think something like that, or do you think that really doesn't matter? Because I think if you have been a founder yourself, then being an investor makes sense as well, because you understand what the founder is going through.
So
can you talk
I
more
think
about that?
So there's two things here, right? Like if you are taking outside capital, which I didn't, if you're taking outside capital, you should not, and I'm saying that like massively, like you should not go and do something else on the side. You shouldn't, because you're taking outside money. Your heart and your time and everything else should be dedicated to the product that you just raised money for, and that's how you should do things. I, on the other hand, I would say I'm not unique on what I do, because I think every entrepreneur does the same thing. I think everyone's guilty of that, because we're just idea, want to do it. But if you're taking asset capital, you need to focus and build and become successful in that one thing. I think that's why like a lot of Web3 founders actually fail, is because raise capital, cool. They have all of this what's the word, like adrenaline in their body of like wanting to achieve this outside capital. Once they've done that, like this fucking all this endorphins or whatever the right terminology is just leaves their body, and they're like, shit, what's next? What's going to be the next thing that gives me that that hype? Anyway, so yeah, if you're raising asset capital, you shouldn't go and do that. But what if you aren't, and what is the right thing that you should do? I think it's, I don't know, man, everyone's different. Going, I'm super successful on the MH side. I'm so grateful of successes and the investments and the founders and everything that we've backed. On the media side, super happy with how business is going. I'm fortunate that I have two successful companies. But was the timing right when I was to move on? Or, I don't know. Like, I look back and I'm like, should I focus on one? Yeah, maybe. But now I feel like I'm in a really good position, so it was the right thing. It's super. I just can't say when someone should move on and do something else. Everyone is at a different pace.
And more success to you. Really happy for you with all the success, because success teaches you something different. Failure teaches you something different. Amazing. Before we wrap up, I just want to talk more about how can founders raise actually. When you're an investor and you get these pitch decks and you have founders in front of you, what are you looking for?
So I think there's many things, and it's really hard to like wrap that up into one like call like this.
Just talk about the top few ones, like the ones that are deal breakers for you.
I'm very big on founders specifically. So like we've just spoken about, everything. I think that if you wrap that up into one and try to make yourself like this perfect thing that I've just spoken about, if I've made sense to everyone listening, that's what I really look for. I'm really, 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 really founder focused. I don't believe in just because you're at the right timing of the narrative, you have a really good idea that you're going to be successful. Yes, that can happen, and we've seen that in crypto. But if I really, risking capital and I want to have the highest percentage of success, the founder needs to be good, and that's from a young age, doing things and having that entrepreneurial mind, because I know that they have passion in them, or they've worked for a company, I don't know, big unicorn company, and they've passionately worked at a high level on the exec side or wherever, that they now have found a gap that they want to go and take on because they weren't able to do that at the company, and they're going to go and do that and solve that issue. That's where I'm looking for people.
Does having experience matter for you? Like if a founder who has done 2 startups and might have a success for you, their chances of success is more better, right? Or you just invest in first time founders as well?
I'm personally like total opposite, and I tell you why. It's because if you find someone that has exited companies before and they're super fortunate in terms of lifestyle and everything else, they're just not going to have the same hunger as someone that's and the drive, as someone that's like a first-time founder, looking to make it and going to do everything in their power because they can. Whereas someone else that has, comes from let's say, more of a privileged background where, I need to raise $6 million because I need to take 200K a month, or 200K a year person capital to pay for my penthouse. Like, you don't have the same drive as the other one. Is like, I'm living minimal. I've done XYZ, and they're the people that have the actual drive and actually want to make success. Yeah.
Got it. So Kamran, that was pretty excellent for founders from a founder perspective and investor perspective as well. Anything, before we wrap up, you would like to share, and how can people learn more about what you're doing? How can they learn about BSC News? How can they learn more about MH Ventures? I'll put the links down in the description, but if you want to share something before we wrap up.
Yeah, so for people that are listening, if you are looking to get into, I don't know, starting your own company, you're an entrepreneur, or you're looking to become a founder and you don't know if you're cut out for it, one thing I'll say is you will fail numerous times over. Maybe not even on the first company, maybe on your second, third, however many you do. And that's fine. That's what happens. And I think, you don't see them as failures, see them as like learning curves of what you need to do. The second thing I would say is when you are, starting a company, if you're like me where you like to be busy all the time, I think of this like my drug of like, I have to be busy. You can work on the wrong things, and you can easily work on the wrong thing just because you want to fill your time. What I would do is make a list of things of like, these are the things I want to get done, and then prioritize them on, is this going to move the needle, or is this something that just needs to be done? And then focus on the needle movers over everything else. Third thing I would say is if you're looking to raise money, make sure that it's the actual right thing to do, not just doing it because it's a fun thing to do that you can put on your LinkedIn. And then if you want to find out anything about me, I don't know why you would, I'm pretty boring. Don't do too much like
No,
outgoing
you shared a
stuff.
lot of valuable insights for me as well. So I think people would be interested in connecting.
Yeah, I think sometimes I do. I tell you what it is. My big thing is I have so much things in here that I want to say out, but I'm just scared to say it out because I don't want to annoy, like, piss people off.
Yeah.
But
I think that's every entrepreneur's mind. They have so many ideas and there's so many things to say. But that's a good thing, right?
yeah,
I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, these are the kind of people that actually make something valuable for the society. I mean, with your company, you're employing people, you're helping people get more visibility. With your fundraising, you're helping people bring their ideas to life. So you're doing something that actually matters, and that's very interesting. Amazing. Thank you so much, Kamran, for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. With that, we'll wrap up the episode. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next episode.
thank you so much for having me.